Open up management. Start recording. Recording's still going. So good. All right. Cool. Let's move on. Okay, so we want to control water, or at least control surface waters enough to the point that the flow dynamics, the sediment transport, the E. coli transport, right? Sediment and E. coli are functionally the same thing in terms of flow and water dynamics. E. coli are just very, very lightweight clay-sized particles, if you want to think of them that way. We want to get flow systems, flow regimes back to as close to natural as possible. Right? So when you have old growth forest with mature tree canopy and a healthy native layer of forest forbs, maybe some shrub level stuff depending on the local ecosystem's composition, right? You have a couple of layers of leaves, of branches, of organic matter, the O1, O2 horizons, all of which are going to slow down and ablate water droplets, which are full of kinetic energy. They're falling at terminal velocity for water droplets through the atmosphere, and they're impacting everywhere on the surface billions of times per storm, right? So, to the extent that we can manage our vegetation layer to get some positive effects on our water layer of resources, we're going to see a lot of synergy and effectiveness in that. Now, in places for recreation purposes where we have intentionally and in a designed way, hopefully a sustainably designed way, stripped away those vegetative protections, those vegetative sort of moderating layers, those armor layers, if you want to think of it in terms of kinetic projectile armor, we need to do some other things. We need to manage those water impacts, essentially managing the flow of water so that the water can't transport biological hazards or whatever from spot to spot. We're going to build constructed spots and special applications of how water flows across built environments into our trail network. So let's talk about grade reversals, grade dips, water bars, buffer zones, and trail slope alignment. Wait, we've already talked about trail slope alignment angle. As Key and Peele say, noise. But grade reversals and grade dips look kind of like this. So let's say we're looking side on to a hill slope. And the hill is, so a ridge line is up here. And the bottom of the slope is out of the board, sloping out toward you. We don't want to put a trail at the top of this ridge line, top of this slope, top of this knife edge, top of this broad shoulder slope, because if we have a normal trail that's going to subside a little bit and erode a little bit normally, we're going to have a drainage ditch running across the top of this thing, and we're going to have to cut slit trenches to drain all the water captured at the top of this mountain, or the top of this ridgeline, for dozens to hundreds of meters to drain the water sideways toward you or into the board away from us. We don't want to put our trails down at the bottom of the slope because that's where all this water is trying to get. And we don't want lots of standing or flowing water right close to our trails like we've talked about in the past. So we want to put our trails, if they are going to be sustainable, relatively cheap, relatively light on their impacts, somewhere in the mid-slope. Or we use mid-slope in trail worlds. In forestry world, we might call that the back slope, right? So the steepest section of a hill slope, the hill's cross-section looks like this, like a bell curve. Steepest spot is right mid-slope, if it's mathematically perfect like that. Okay? So let's say we have a trail that on paper connects one end of this ridge line to the other, and it's relatively flat. So water is going to hit above slope, flow down to this point overland, intercept the trail, and flow off the trail to the downslope side and continue on down. We have now an ecologically invisible, or hydrologically at least, invisible trail that we have removed trees from, or maybe just removed the land cover from, right? We've exposed the surface of the trail so it's not covered in wet and hygroscopic, meaning pulling water out of the air and holding it at the surface there. Like dead leaves or wood chips, stuff like that. Our little trail here, even if it's fully benched, you remember that from our little Play-Doh exercise, what a fully benched or half benched trail looks like on the side of the slope. It's still going to subside a little bit. It's still going to form that sort of cupped out or parabolic shape in cross section. And we saw exactly what that looks like out by the little stream bed in Thompson Woods. We know what this looks like. We know it's going to happen because it happens on every stretch of every trail ever created. Because we're not armoring it up with asphalt or French drain stones like the Romans used to or whatever. But the Romans wouldn't have called it French drains because France didn't exist. When Rome did, they would have called it Gallic draining, I guess, or something, whatever the Latin for draining is. Moving on. What we do in trail construction and design to make these trails or keep these trails hydrologically transparent or invisible is we use grade reversals and grade dips. So, a grade reversal splits this whole long trail as it gets cupped out. It splits it from one continuous reservoir, one stream bed, one tiny little pond with no outflow. It's going to capture all that water and hold it as it starts to cup out. It splits it into a bunch of much smaller watersheds, micro watersheds that we can control. So, grade reversals are the trail, instead of being totally flat and horizontal, goes upslope a little bit, and then downslope a little bit, and then upslope, reverse, 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 reverse. So in net, we haven't changed how much this trail is climbing or descending. We are saying at any spot on the trail needs to be climbing or descending, depending on which direction you're going, because flat sections of trail are gonna catch and hold water. So, grade reversals, if rain falls in the ascending or above centerline portion of a trail, that water may get captured and it will flow along the trail a short distance. But if this distance is really short, it can't be that much water. There's just a tiny little watershed. If this distance between the top of this little watershed right here and the bottom of this little watershed, where the trail has descended to its lowest point, it has reversed its ascension down to the low point. If this distance is only 15 meters, right? 50 feet. Even in a gully washer of a storm, you've only got 50 feet of watershed that can collect here. Now, you've also got the watershed from the other side above that low point, right? So another 15 meters. But you can make this arbitrarily small. And so there are some beautifully constructed segments of trail. We'll see some examples of those a little bit later, where these rolling grade reversals, they're super short. Like, you can see them and you can tell, all right, I'm walking down a little bit. Oh, all right, the next few feet I'm walking up the slope a little bit. but the next 15 feet after that, I'm walking down the slope. Oh, this is nice, right? So you're not like Paul Bunyan stepping straight up the slope. You're not, wearing your knees out, blowing out your quads, trying to brake and slow down, going straight down the slope. You're constantly sort of surfing up and down. And on a mountain bike, for example, or on a horse, this is really fun. This is nice. It's not just a straight, boring sidewalk that is super high speed because I just want to get to the end of it. It's like, oh, let me swoop up a little bit and kind of bank around this tree that's right here. And let me pick up speed again down here and pedal like 3 pedal cycles up and then coast down. Like, you don't even have time to get tired because you're just pedaling twice and then coasting for a while and pedaling 3 times and coasting for a while, right? Rolling grade reversals get us there. It breaks the watershed down into micro watersheds. This practice alone can take an otherwise absolutely unsustainable and blown out trail. If you take an existing trail and do deviations upslope and downslope on that existing trail, this technique alone can make a totally unsustainable, extremely expensive, extremely dangerous trail and make it safe, more fun, and almost totally sustainable by itself. Rolling grade reversals, this is one of those few silver bullet techniques that we have. This solves problems. It's not particularly expensive to do. And so Shawnee National Forest has been based on research out of my own research group and a couple of guidebooks based out of like trail construction manuals based on that research. They've been rolling this out. So has everybody else over the past 20, 25 years. So this is a relatively new technique, but it works. And again, it's super cheap. So pay attention to rolling grade reversals. This is a big answer to a lot of questions with relatively few negative side effects. Cool. That's grade reversals. Our next issue or technique was going to be rolling grade dips. So turn this back off. At the bottom of each of these micro watersheds, we're going to get a little bit of water accumulation. Maybe only 50 feet or 100 feet worth. Maybe only 25 feet total on both sides flowing down to that spot. But we are going to need to do something with water in that bottom of each of these micro watersheds. So, in the bottom of these, and you can see these are subtle when they're done right, but once you start looking for them in beautifully constructed trail systems like Green Earth Incorporated here in town, right? I've been working with Steph Eichholz and them for years to install these and roll these out across their trail networks here in town because they're almost zero maintenance. Grade dips at the bottom of these, instead of a water bar, we all know what a water bar is, right? It's a slit trench that we cut perpendicular to the direction of the trail. So water flowing along the trail, even water that we have, we're mostly outsloping the trail, so water should be flowing straight off the side of the trail, but any water that does get entrained by the trail is going to flow to this spot. The old way was to put in a tripping hazard, a water bar, and then every spring, dig out the water bar. And then every summer, hike the trail, network a couple of times, dig out some more water bars. And then in the autumn and winter off season, dig out a bunch of water bars, right? Because when you have a slit trench that is perpendicular or near perpendicular to the direction of the trail and therefore the water flow, the water hits or drops down into the trench, hits the back side of the trench, and almost completely stops moving for a moment while it changes direction and begins to go from stopped to flowing typically pretty slowly in the direction of that slit trench, that drainage ditch. And while the water has basically stopped and so forth, water only carries silt and sand particles and coarse fragments, sticks, pebbles, rocks, larger stuff, only carries those proportional to the speed of the water. So when the water stops moving, and then starts to flow very slowly out of that slip trench, it dumps everything. So that slip trench that you dug out is going to fill in every time it rains, to the extent that there's any soil transport there, which is why we need these to be really short. So we're only moving any possible soil from this tiny little distance right here. Instead of a deep, narrow slit trench that is hard to dig out and that we will need to dig out every season, up to multiple times a season until the heat death of the universe. A grade dip is a real wide and shallow. It might only be a few inches deep, but it might be 3, 4, 5 meters wide. Okay? And in that way, the water keeps flowing as it slowly changes direction. It doesn't dump everything. So what soil transport we do have, and again, the goal is always 0, but practically speaking, we're going to have a little bit of soil particle transportation with flowing water. We keep that water making a wide radius, velocity preserving sort of turn, and in that way, we don't have to dig out this slit trench and then 100 feet ahead, dig out that slit trench, and then 100 feet ahead, dig out that slit trench, and so forth. We just kind of walk the trail and maybe not, just kind of kick any pile of leaves in this real wide sort of spoon-shaped depression. Looks like God just took a thumb and left a thumbprint right there at the bottom of these. It's called grade dips. Okay? So a grade dip, this is the trail. This is the upslope side of the trail. This is the downslope side of the trail. Okay? A grade dip looks kind of like this. Right? It's a kind of circular, it's elliptical in shape, right? Just a big depression right here. So if there's any water flowing, we want to keep it moving just enough to turn, go to the downslope side, and then get to this area right here, downslope, and slow down because it's hitting all the leaves, roots, and organic detritus, the O1, O2 layers, and leave all this soil that was right here, real close by right here, but downslope. Okay? And water cannot flow upslope. It's not even going to try. So we don't have to worry about any of this really filling in, where a slit trench is absolutely going to fill in. All right? So grade dips plus grade reversals make for very happy trails, and most importantly for you and me, because it might be you and me, makes for very happy trail crews. We can do exciting things like put in beautiful rock work, zip lining big boulders into place using steel zip lines, basically high lines, grip hoists. We can do dynamite work because we aren't just mindlessly digging out these slit trenches over and over and over and over. It frees us up for the fun stuff. Trail patrolling, putting in beautiful campsites, putting in beautiful backcountry toilets with a view, right? We don't have to deal with just this utterly brainless slit trench, water bar, cutting and maintenance over and over and over and over. But all of this is only necessary because trails typically expose the surface of our soil resource to the kinetic energy of rain. Where we can, we're gonna lean into that vegetation layer. Stay. To do all of that work for us. Okay, so this is a wave tank, and this is a direct demonstration of what things like mangroves do. And I'm sure you guys have seen videos like this in forest ecology or watershed management, something like that. And it's a fairly simple concept, right? So flexible ligamentous plant material, right, can absorb that wave energy a lot better than inflexible and brittle or friable soil particles can. This is not any kind of, this is transparent to the plant, doesn't matter to the plant. So we want to do basically this with respect to what your trail is doing. So here is a Japanese example, because they have to worry about what landslides do. So volcanic and tectonic tremor action liquefies soil and gets heavy, wet, saturated mountain soils to flow downslope. Okay. So those little sort of miniature dams partway up the stream on the right-hand diorama there, anybody know what those are called? These are check dams. They check the flow. They slow it down. They nibble away at the accumulated kinetic energy of this water as it is peak flowing. Okay? So, we're looking for the inverse of this. This is what your water bars are. Each one of those water bars is forcing a small drop into the slit trench of the water bar and accumulating all of that soil that is being transported, right? So we're looking for the opposite of this. Okay? Cool. And in that way, we are keeping the water flowing, but at a low enough rate. We're looking for like centimeters per second, if that, not miles per hour or cubic feet per second kind of flux rates. Okay. In places where our soils and our water resources are meeting and interfacing, physical separation, so building up a boardwalk, a planked and decked system to physically separate us from the water resource and the soil that is saturated water. This is at Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge on the border of Georgia and Florida. It's a Florida-Georgia line, right? That's expensive. That's dimensional lumber. They had to canoe in to the back end of a swamp. This is summer camp, by the way. And that is just the only way that we can protect the water and protect the soil, because walking on these supersaturated soils is going to move that supersaturated soil into that shallow water right next to the saturated soil. And that is kind of it. Okay, cool. So for the biological side of things, we are building bathrooms, or providing people with wag bags, or requiring people to provide their own wag bags or chemical toilets, or whatever the thing is. A backcountry version of this that is not served by any kind of plumbing or pump truck is going to be called a privy specifically. An outhouse is kind of a front country version of a privy. Privy is a hole in the ground or an above ground holding pen or tank for, in some cases, depending on the soil type and in particular the microbial composting activity. There are a lot of composting toilets where you only poop in it because everybody peeing in it as well is going to add too much moisture and in particular too much ammonia. It's actually going to sterilize that soil and feces mixture and smell like sharply of ammonia, and it's super unpleasant, and it's not going to biodegrade because it is chemically sterilizing itself, or we are chemically sterilizing it with our urine. So compliance is difficult in a backcountry privy situation. That is okay, but it is difficult. All right, let's end a few minutes early here, and let's pick it up with the tail end of water resource management on Wednesday. Get ready for Thanksgiving. Dang! While we're packing up,